Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. We're delighted to have such a large group here, and there's good reason for that, because we have a very interesting speaker here. But before I introduce him, I'd like to say that we at the Rogers Memorial Library invite you to, I know some of you have not come to our events, and some of you live outside our library district, so do take a newsletter when you leave. And our programs are open to everyone, and we love to have all of you come. You can get an idea of what we're doing by taking a look at one of our flyers or our newsletter. Anyway, my name is Penny Wright, and I'm welcoming you on behalf of the whole library. How many of you would have liked to have hot dogs today? I wanted hot dogs. I was outvoted by my people I work with. Well, anyway, you can blame them. We're not having hot dogs, but do help yourself to cheese. Okay. Lloyd Handwerker has come out from Brooklyn, where he lives. He was born in Brooklyn, grew up in Lawrence, graduated from Oberlin College with a major in political science, comes in handy right about now, and then moved to Rochester, New York, where he studied photography and video at the Visual Studies Workshop. After traveling extensively in Southeast Asia, he went on to study film at NYU, where he received his MFA. He worked for over 20 years in the film industry as both an assistant cameraman and cinematographer on both narrative and documentary features, short films, and music videos. His film, Famous Nathan, which I believe was released in 2014, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. And with enough encouragement, we might be able to show it here at some point. You can communicate with us about that film if you like. At any rate, Lloyd's lifelong passion has been researching and creating a documentary film and book about Nathan's Famous of Coney Island, which was created by his grandfather, Nathan Handwerker, in 1916. And I want to mention that Lloyd brought some books with him and some DVDs with him. So if you feel like browsing later, he would be very happy to sell you a book and sign a copy. Please welcome Lloyd Handwerker.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. Let me see if this, how's that sound?
Yeah.
Everyone hear me?
Good.
Well, pleasure to be here. I want to thank the library for inviting me here. The book just came out about a month and a half ago, so this is one of the first events that I've done so far. Like my introduction, you know, researching my family and researching the business of Nathan's Famous has really been an obsession with me. I started when I was in my 20s. I was studying photography in Rochester at the time, and they had a video camera available to use, and in those days it was a Betamax black and white video camera. There was no color. And I had a lot of relatives that lived down in Florida. Unfortunately, my grandparents had passed away. My grandfather passed away when I was 17, my grandmother when I was 19. And there was a lot of history that was lost in their passing. And I decided that I was going to try to capture some of it before it was too late, before all my relatives were gone. So I went down to Florida with this video camera, not knowing anything about videography, anything about sound, lighting, and I just started recording my elderly relatives, and it just, you know, was lucky that a lot of them lived in the same complex, so I could, you know, I could go out one door and go down the hallway and go into another apartment and up another flight of stairs, and I probably recorded about 30 hours of material in that one trip down to Florida, and I was just mesmerized by my relatives. They were just of a particular time and place and characters that you don't meet too much anymore. And I just loved all the stories that they were telling me, and I was, pretty much hooked on, finding out more. So it just became a lifelong journey of research and uncovering stories. As you know, a million people have a story about going to Coney Island and going to Nathan's, and my grandfather was one of 13 brothers and sisters, so there's an enormous family resource there, a lot of cousins, a lot of, and then you think about all the workers that went through that place, many hundreds of workers. So I started researching and trying to find and locate people that knew my grandfather, and I'm still finding people. I still find workers who I haven't met up to now, who are in their 80s, of course, now, who will tell me more stories even. But it's been a lifelong passion, and it resulted in a film, a documentary, which you were told came out in 2014, which premiered at Tribeca Film Festival. And you can only put so much into a film. You can only tell a certain kind of story when you make a film. There's a lot of material. I have over 300 hours of interviews with relatives and workers and people that knew my grandfather. So the book came after the film because I knew there was a lot more to tell, a lot more information to get across. And I even have another project, another Nathan's project that I'm interested in doing, which is another book, which is much more a visual book. It's all the sort of documents and photographs and memorabilia and everything that I've collected through this entire history, as well as transcripts of workers and other people, family members that work there. So that's my next project. So I'm never done, it seems, with Nathan's and my family. So I'm sure. Well, there's a couple things we're going to do here. I brought a film with me. I think it's like a 5 to 7 minute film. You won't see it anywhere else. It was something that my dad saved in his filing cabinet for about 40 years. And it's from 1957. There's a little piece that was done on NBC about Nathan's, and it includes some talking with my grandfather and my dad and my uncle. You get introduced to my family through the film, and you'll see Nathan's, of course, from the 50s. Then I'll read a little bit from the book, and of course answer questions from all of you, or listen to comments that you might have, and stories you might have. So I'm glad you're here, and looking forward to further discussion. So yeah, maybe why don't we show the film? Yeah, if you can turn around, you'll be able to watch it over there.
Should we turn off the lights?
Yeah. Should we shut the shades or not?
Yeah, maybe.
Or maybe it's okay without it.
Do you want me to pause until we do, or?
No, you can. I think everyone can see it fine.
We'll do the lights and see what happens.
Oh, I think it's fine.
This girl in summertime, a lot of folks will be by the sea, by the beautiful sea. All along our coast, we'll be collecting seashells, souvenirs, and sunburn. We'll swallow salt water and get sand in the sandwiches, and it'll be lots of fun. There's no beach place where more people will have more fun, though, than a 5-mile strip of land at the tip of Brooklyn called Coney Island. Coney Island is frankly incredible. Even the eyes of the live television cameras in the Social Security offices of the Lowe's building, high above Surf Avenue, the main drag, find Coney hard to believe. On every fair weekend this summer, more than 1 million people will parachute from the parachute jump. Hold hands on the boardwalk and splash in the Atlantic Ocean. Ride and slide on the 4 giant roller coasters. Or the world's most gigantic Ferris wheel. Coney Island is the most. And the most among the attractions that Coney Island has to offer is the Coney Island Red Hot. In this beach resort, the Frankfurter is top dog. It owes its exalted position to the 6 million hot dogs that yearly scamper across the counters of the Taj Mahal of the Red Hot, Nathan's Famous Inc. Nathan's Famous Inc. is famous wherever the stars and stripes fly. Clients include statesmen, Maharajas, and the Brooklyn Dodgers. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Neither rain nor snow nor dark of night to keep these hot dogs from their appointed routes.
Mustard bowls, I don't know if you remember them, but with a wooden stick and you put mustard on your hot dog.
As many as 56,000 Frankfurters have gone from hand to mouth by Nathan's in one day. Over 100 million in the past 40 years.
Those were hamburgers that were made fresh on the premises, actually. We had butchers back in those days. Paddles that they brought the Frankfurters out on. That's Sammy Fiorello, who is very famous for being the fastest Frankfurter server in all of Nathan's history.
Each can dispense as many as 5 and 5/100 hot dogs per second. Plus they can catch and make them change. No electronic computer has as yet been devised to determine the rate of hot dog intake. There are too many variable factors, you see. It takes 150 sleight-of-hand artists working round the clock in shifts to transmit the hot dogs with its successors.
That was Reuben Epstein, who worked the hamburger griddle. His name was Epi. He used to sing a lot of songs as a cuss word.
Just behind the firing line, a member of the general staff solves problems of logistics.
That's my dad.
The Nathan's, Lloyd Handwerker, son of the founder.
That's my uncle, Murray. Took over the business.
Echelon, president of Coney Island Chamber of Commerce, vice president of Nathan's, Lloyd Handwerker, older son of the founder.
This is Joe Handwerker, who was a nephew and a
Chief
big part of the business there.
Tomorrow's order. And the founder, the original Nathan of Nathan's Famous,
There's my
Nathan
grandfather.
Handwerker, who established this institution on this spot in 1916. Hot dogs then 5 cents with root beer free. Nathan Handwerker and all the members of his first staff.
My grandmother.
His wife Ida Handwerker.
When we were kids, my brother and I, and my sister, who lived in Florida with her family, my mother used to bring us down to the store and put us in a Frankfurter roll basket so that we could play, while she could go out on the counter and work alongside of my father. But this has always been a family business. And one of the problems we've had is keeping my mother away. She is so much in the habit of coming down here to give us a hand, she keeps insisting on coming down to help her.
Well, my father's a problem also. He's always worried. It took us many years before we convinced him to go to Florida for vacation. And in 1947, when he was down there, we had that terrible blizzard up there. Well, that day he called up, wanted to know how things were. And at that point, when he called, we had already sold 6,000 Frankfurters. But he kept on worrying. Isn't that so, Bob?
That's right, Maury. Boy, you in South Bend, you know everything. Let me tell you, I expect to be here a lot more years, and I'll see that you learn a little more.
Portrait of an American family. Ida, Nathan, Murray, and Saul Handwerker. Founders and continuers of a national institution, Nathan's Famous Incorporated. national habit.
Got a little introduction to the place, to my family. That was actually scripted. So what they were saying wasn't something that they just came up with off the cuff. They obviously describing a generational difference in approaches to business, which actually played out in real life, and is written about a lot in the book. Just to tell you a little bit about my grandfather, he was born in Yaroslavl, Poland in 1892. He was one of 13 brothers and sisters, like I said. My great-grandmother Rose married my great-grandfather when she was 15, and he was 31. He had married previously and had 3 children prior to the 13 that he had with my great-grandmother, and he was a shoemaker. And my great-grandmother was probably the bigger influence on my grandfather in terms of business ethics and ideas that he carried forward into his business at Nathan's. She had a little stand in the marketplace in the small town in Poland and sold vegetables and chicken and other things like that. But she was quite a good business person, and she was very good about how she dealt with her customers, and something definitely that influenced my grandfather. And my grandfather never went to school a day in his life, actually. So he was essentially illiterate for most of his life. He had a little bit of tutoring when he came to America, but I remember going to restaurants and having my grandmother read the menu to my grandfather. So he did all his business work just from his mind. He was very good at math, but he used to have his friends read contracts or read the letters that came to him, so because he couldn't read them. And part of that reason was, if you grew up in a small town in Poland, parents had a choice of whether to send you to school or not. And I guess for one reason or another, his parents decided that they needed him to work at home. You know, by the time he was 6, he was mentoring with his father, you know, making shoes. At 11, he went to live and work at a bakery because my great-grandfather wasn't making too much money. He lived there for 2 years without ever seeing his family. From 11 to 13, he worked day and night in this bakery, both baking bread. He'd wake up at 7 o'clock. No, he'd go to bed at 7 o'clock at night. He'd wake up at midnight and he'd start baking the bread with the baker. Then in the morning, he'd go out and sell it. You know, so I mean, that was the life that he grew up in. He knew pretty much nothing but work from a very early age, and it, you know, carried forward until he came to New York, and when he was almost 19, 18, turning 19, and you know, he knew that working in a bakery he wasn't going to starve. He knew that working in a restaurant he was going to have food, and that was a big part of his motivation for starting in the restaurant business. And he started in a place called Max's Busy Bee, which was a luncheonette in New York City, and that's where he first got his work in the restaurant business. First learned about making lemonade and even cooking frankfurters. So that's kind of the arc of you know, the beginning of the story from childhood to New York, which I go into in a lot greater detail. I mean, what I'm really lucky to have is a 3.5-hour interview that my cousin did with my grandfather the year before he died, in which he went into great detail. I mean, he had incredible memory about you know, everything from his early childhood in Poland until his time at Nathan. So that's a big part of what I'm writing about in the early stages of the book, and we owe a lot to my cousin for recording that before he died. So, I was going to read a bit in a more modern part of the saga to you, and then we can open up to questions. So, this is a chapter called The Family. By 1925, the business had come to be called Nathan's Famous. Harry Wildman, the sign painter, now joined in the business by his son Lester, created a billboard atop the store. In a demonstration of permanency, the builders fabricated their creation out of wood, not oilcloth. On the tail end swoosh that ran off the terminal end in the name, Wildman added the phrase, "Famous Frankfurter and soft drink stand." Later that tag would be reduced to the simple modifier, famous. Word had gotten out. People came from all over to visit Coney Island. Among the resort town's attractions was the busy Frankfurter stand on Surf Avenue. An excursion to Coney often went like this. Visitors exited the subway terminal and immediately headed to Nathan's Famous to buy a hot dog. They then continued on to the beach, perhaps sampling the demonic delights of the Bowery or Steeplechase Park along the way. When they left the beach at the end of the day, they visited Nathan's Famous once again for a second Frankfurter. So the store caught them coming and going. For Nathan and Ida Handwerker, the business was family and the family was business. The line between the two entities blurred. They worked 16, 18, 20-hour days, both of them, on their feet much of the time, fierce in their determination to make the fledgling enterprise succeed. On the busy 3-day holiday weekends in the summer, Nathan often never went home. The work took its toll not only on his person, but on his clothing. He always wore a traditional luncheonette uniform of white duck. Sometimes, if important visitors were expected or if circumstances warranted, topped off with a black bow tie. Slaving over the stove was hell on fabric. Burn holes and grease stains were constants. He always wore his cuffs out. He ran around so much, noted veteran Nathan's Famous employee Jay Cohn. The damage extended even to his shoes. Padaletta was a prominent Coney Island businessman and community figure who, as a boy in the 1920s, worked at the shoe shine stand in his father's barbershop. He recalled Nathan as a genial enough customer whose sturdy leather wingtips were a mess. It was a great challenge to give him a shine because he always had all this grease on his shoes from the Frankfurters and whatever else came off the grills, Oletta remembered. Any shoe polish the boy applied would simply smear. Nathan would be too busy exchanging pleasantries with Oletta's father and the other customers to notice what was going on at ankle level. Every time he came in, I tried to get that grease off his shoes, Oletta said. So someone suggested to me, why don't you try a match and burn it off? So I did just that. He was talking to the barbers, so he had no idea what I was doing. The shoes went up in flames. I almost burned his whole leg, and I burned my fingers smothering out the fire. Such were the hazards of life for a dedicated Frankfurter man. On rare occasions, Nathan would head over to Lowe's Shore Theater, directly across Surf Avenue from the store, and slip into the darkened interior for a nap. Otherwise, he seemed to be always busy, always working, always watching. He was very simply always at the store. Nathan had a strict, almost obsessive, hands-on approach to running his business. Vigilance was his byword. Though he eventually expanded the premises to include upstairs offices, he always remained a very visible presence on the floor, in both the kitchen and the counter area. Longtime employees referred to his habitual cigar as a mark of his presence. They'd smell the smoke and know that he was around. He would step into various nooks and crannies and recesses at the store. Workers would look up to be surprised to see the diminutive owner staring out at them, monitoring their movements. My grandfather was 5'3", so he was on the short side. You never knew, said one of his longtime employees. You turned around and he was right behind you. He was quiet. I trust myself and the stove, Nathan said. I don't trust anybody else. After leaving to have dinner at home with his wife, Nathan would at times return to the store later without warning. I hate to see a manager walking around with a clean apron, he would announce, checking the workers for signs they had been hard at work. One young manager was aware of these late evening sneak attacks, and while Nathan was absent, he would take off his apron and stomp on it to make it dirty. Nathan must have gotten wind of the trick since he confronted the kid. I got to ask you a question, Nathan said. You're always working by the steam table. On the steam table, we've got barbecue gravy, which is red, and the roast beef gravy, which is brown. But you never have barbecue gravy or roast beef gravy on your apron. You have footprints. Nathan started to laugh, and because the guilty party was a good worker, he wrote the whole thing off as a youthful hijinks. But the kid learned that you have to get up pretty early in the morning to slip one past the boss. During his late rounds at night, Nathan would often check the store's waste cans. He uncovered discarded frankfurters, pieces of meat that had been cut off along with their fat, half-empty bottles discarded with a portion of the contents unused. The next morning, he would confront this or that employee. I found too many French fries, what went wrong? Or I found so much extra hamburger, they shouldn't be there. If he found anything amiss, Highbrow recalled, the roof came off the next day, with the boss checking everything back to the source to figure out what might have happened. Nathan made it clear he was in the business of selling food, not throwing it away. He eventually had insides of the waste cans painted white so he could more easily ascertain their contents. And actually, he would also empty the garbage can sometimes at night just to see what people were throwing out. He really resented food, recalled his grandson, Steve Handwerker. It's not an idiosyncrasy, it's a valid concern. Valid concern, not just on financial terms, but as a moral issue, because he grew up in a time when he had no food. The contents of the garbage pails represented the terminal end of the store's supply chain. Nathan paid strict attention to the opposite end too, keeping close tabs on the wholesalers who delivered the food he served to his customers. Believing firmly that the sweetest potatoes came from Maine, he made excursions to the state himself, actually surveying the farm fields where the crop was being grown. It was almost as if he was replaying an experience of his youth when he purchased a supply of potatoes from a baron in Poland and returned with them in triumph to the spudless Yaroslav marketplace. Eventually, he settled on a specific region in the fertile valley below the slopes of Maine's Mount Katahdin, where he found the best tasting potatoes. He didn't buy them by the bushel either, or even by the truckload. If he liked what he saw, Nathan would buy out an entire farm's crop. He had them shipped south via railroad and stored in warehouses. Eventually, it would take 14 railway cars to transport a season's worth of potatoes. His vigilance didn't end with these out-of-state trips. Nathan noticed that soaking potatoes in mortar leached some of the starch out of them, leaving behind the more concentrated sugars that made the tubers taste extra sweet. He instituted the water soak as part of the preparation process. Word got around about the matchless potato fries Nathan was serving. The man was simply not content to sell the normal, everyday fries that every other Coney Island outlet dished up. He had to be not ordinary, but extraordinary. He went the extra mile, all the way to Maine, to make it happen. Today, almost every French fry sold in the country is frozen first and then cooked. The average fast food outlet never sees a real potato, one that does not arrive in the kitchen already cut and frozen. Frozen products provide ease of distribution, preparation, and storage. As with the roast chicken of Woody Allen's mother, the modern French fry has been put through the deflavorizer. Current-day customers might not be able to detect the difference between fresh and frozen, but for Nathan, freshness mattered. I could go on and on, but I'll leave it there. That gives you an idea of the fastidiousness, the obsessiveness of my grandfather, which I've inherited, unfortunately, when it comes to researching this story. So,
Can you talk a little bit, you talk about him being a really exacting boss,
yeah.
yet a really beloved employer. Can you talk about that?
The employees?
Yes. I mean,
Okay.
he kept employees for years and years, right?
Right.
Who was the longest employer there? Like how long?
Well, 50 years. Joe Handwerker worked there for 50 years. I mean, you know, in those days they started as teenagers. So because he was a nephew, he employed in the very early days, in the teens and the 20s, a lot of relatives, a lot of cousins, a lot of nephews, a lot of, you know, family members. And then obviously he needed more and more employees because originally the store started in the alleyway. I don't know if, I'm assuming most of you know Coney Island, or a lot of you. If you don't, there's an alleyway halfway down the block from Stillwell Avenue, and that's where the store began. It began as really, you know, a 5-foot counter on Surf Avenue and 8 foot in the walk, very primitive, no, you know, no bathrooms, no electricity. It was just, you know, sort of sand. You know, so I think at first, I've heard lots of stories about how he was with employees. I mean, in the early days, I think he fired a lot of them because they didn't live up to his standards, and he was an extreme perfectionist, and he was on top of people all the time. I don't think that ever changed. But I think, you know, by the 30s and 40s, he started developing a really strong crew, you know, of people that, and partly that's because what I've been told is that he paid well. He paid more than minimum wage in those days. They were also at some point instituted bonuses so that, you know, at the end of the year he shared the profits with the workers. And, you know, in those days too, I mean, one wanted a job, needed a job, and it was you know, it was steady work, and it was, you know, there was a lot of work to be had there. It was a popular place. So he developed, you know, an incredible crew of workers that many of whom stayed 30, 40, 50 years. That wasn't too unusual. So I would say 50 is probably the longest. My grandfather was only there for about 55 total. He, you know, started the store in 1916 and retired in 1971. So.
Did he start the franchises, or did he?
Then the franchise is a much larger story. It didn't start until '68. The second store, and that was more what my uncle and my dad had wanted. They wanted, and he opposed, they wanted expansion. They wanted to have more stores and bring the name and the brand and the quality to more people around the country, which made sense. And it certainly, you know, if you see how it played out with McDonald's and Burger King and all these other places, was a smart way to go if that's the kind of business you want to run. My grandfather only wanted to run the place in Coney Island. He only wanted one place, and it was so successful that he thought, why would you need anything else? Why would you need the headache? Why would you wouldn't be able to have the same quality? So franchises started much later. The second store came about by accident, actually, and that's the store in Oceanside,
Yes.
which happened it actually became a Nathan's in '59. I mean, it's a long story, but my uncle left the business because he wasn't getting what he wanted from his father in certain aspects of working there, and had ambitions to open a new place. And so he opened his own place. He took over a place called Roadside Rest in Oceanside in '56 and tried to make a go of it as his own restaurant. It wasn't succeeding too well, so my grandfather bought him out, you know, took over the debts, bought it out, and it became a second Nathan's. And it was something my grandfather never was happy about, even though it was a pretty cool place in many ways, if you've ever been there. And then Yonkers happened in '65, which is the third store. So, you know, for 50 years, there are three, you know, I mean, most of, like, for 40-something years, there's only one store, and it gradually started from this alleyway and expanded very slowly down the block. So if you know, Stryker's Walk to Stillwell, that took 45 years, actually, the expansion of Nathan's down that block. That's how slow my grandfather moved in terms of wanting to change things. I mean, you know, he was slow, and he was, you know, at first he opposed seafood as a menu item because he thought people who were kosher might object. So, you know, he was right in many ways. I mean, he was successful in whatever he did. He didn't need all the headaches of, you know, of the other stores and the headaches of, you know, expanded product lists and catering and other things. It became sort of a pain in his neck in many respects. So that's, yes.
I just want to make a comment. It starts from humble beginnings, you're saying, with a 5-foot stand, and then you see the film, and then you make an allusion to your grandfather's mathematical mind.
Yeah.
What really impresses me is that the technology, I mean, in the that was 1950s, and
Yeah.
you saw automation at that level.
Yes.
So, and I'm also sensing that he didn't want to see the franchise, but yet he was open to do the automation that took him to a scale.
Right.
Because ultimately, how many can a human being put on a grill and take off, right? So my point is, or my question is, was that skill set in him, or with your uncles, or did he have the foresight to say, I got to get some consulting people in? But I was very impressed seeing
That's a good question, a big question. Well, I mean, people never stopped serving the hot dogs themselves. There was nothing automated about the hot dog griddle. I mean, that was manned by people, you know, 12, 14 hours a day in double shifts because the place was open for many years, 24 hours a day. Some of their best business was done at 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. But yeah, in terms of the machinery, my grandfather was very inventive and very interested in new machinery all the time. And from what I've been told by workers, I mean, I have a relative here who might know something about that, so maybe you want to jump in.
I do believe that the reason the hamburger machine happened was because of consistency of size and less hand labor of doing it.
Right.
And that's how it began.
Right.
And there was no automation on the grill. Everything on the grill, the clams, everything was done by hand.
Right, but they did develop machines also they packaged their own crackers for the clam chowder and things like that. So there were, my grandfather was open to things, and I'm sure my uncle and my dad must have had some influence on. I know when it came to counting money, there's a lot of stories about that.
That was all slid on marble.
Because you can imagine in the early days, there was all coinage, right? And it wasn't just clean coinage, it was dirty coinage, it was greasy, it was salty, it was sandy. They had to be cleaned. The coins had to be cleaned. And they counted it by hand for decades, until my uncle finally insisted that they try out a new coin counting machine, okay, that would package the coins. But as my grandfather, because he always was one step ahead of everyone, he said, won't the machine jam because of the salt and the sand? And he was right, so he still had to wash the coins, I was told, and then put them in the machine. But, he went along with changes, for sure. It's just, as far as a store and a menu, he was proving to be an incredible success, so he didn't want the headache of extra items and extra places, for sure. I mean, he knew that the quality was never going to be as good as it was there, because he was there all the time. There's stories about him once a week, I'll let you jump in, once a week, even into his 60s, he would come at 3 in the morning in disguises and would stand online and listen to the customers and what they were saying about the food and about the workers. And I mean, he would do that once a week in his 60s. So you can imagine the kind of, fanaticism that was involved in his work ethic that carried through for his entire life. So, how would you get anything better, as a product than someone who's there watching it all the time, tasting it, who knew every facet of that business because he started it from scratch. So in other words, when the Frankfurters came by truckload, he would get on the truck and he would start to sample them. They were smoked, they weren't cooked on the griddle yet, but he would sample them, he would chew on them, he would spit them out. He would sense the taste. If he didn't like them, he thought there was too much water in them, if the seasoning wasn't right, whatever the reason, even the casing, which came from Switzerland, which was a very fine casing, he would send the whole truck back. He had that kind of power. So he was fanatical about everything that he did in that store. And it rubbed off on the workers too, and the managers, and the ones that stayed. What do you want to
No, I was going to bring up the mystery shopper was him.
The which?
The mystery shopper at 3 in the morning.
Oh,
where
yeah.
he would come in different costumes, and they would try to figure out, what was he going to come dressed as?
Right. I mean, they knew he was coming, but
And another point is that Ronnie's father developed the crinkle cut knife because they did it with a lot of hand labor, and her father came up with the blades.
See, I didn't know that, but her father was Harry Handwerker, who was the youngest of the 13, who took over the custard stand and the bumper car ride, which was in the alleyway across from Nathan's. I don't know if whoever's been down there remembers that was Harry Handwerker. And Anna Singer was before him. Anna Singer was my grandfather's sister who ran the custard stand, if you remember that stand. And she was quite a force. She was a tough character. So yes.
Yes, I have something to say about the food.
Okay.
My mother was a nurse, and she was very, very strict about what we put in our mouth. And she would never allow us to have a hot dog. And then she found out that Nathan served Hebrew national hot dog. And the meat in the hot dog was the best meat that you could find. So we all went to Coney Island, and we were now able to eat hot dogs, and they were fabulous. But what you just said about the potatoes was the most wonderful piece of information, because nothing compared to the fried potatoes. And when I grew up and got married, I gave very fancy dinner parties with Nathan's potatoes, and my reputation my nickname was Bubbles. You have to go to Bubbles' house and taste the potatoes because they were superb. And so you just told me why, and thank you very much.
And I only told you part of the story too. It was also the way they blanched it first in the kitchen at a certain temperature. Yeah, and you know, Jerry Minetti was there for many years. I mean, these guys were there 30 years doing the same job. I don't know if you remember, but you could only buy one item at a time at Nathan's. In other words, you couldn't wait online like a fast food restaurant today and order your drink and your hamburger and your fries and your hot dog. You stood on the Frankfurter line and you got your Frankfurter, and you had, if you were lucky, you had a family with you, so one person could stand on the drink line. But they were super fast because of that, because Sammy Fiorello, who served, and people have confirmed this, 60 hot dogs in 60 seconds, he could serve them faster than you could get your money out of your pocket. Those things were going out, you know, as fast as they could. So you weren't waiting. Like you go to Nathan's today, and people say you'll wait a half an hour just to get up to the counter. You know, it was a lot quicker in those days, because those guys again worked there 20, 30 years doing the same thing.
On the same token that Bubbles was talking
about the French fries.
The doctor's uniforms.
Yeah, well, all right. Well, you're getting into the whole subject of myth making and stories that everyone knows about Nathan's. There was one other thing that you. Oh, they weren't Hebrew National, by the way.
No, of course not.
No. Well, I don't know who told you that, but they were kosher. They were called kosher style. They weren't actually kosher. They were made by hybrid provisions. But no, but the quality was extremely high. It was a high quality beef product, probably the best Frankfurter, and I'm saying that not because it was my family's Frankfurter at the time, and I've been told that by the manufacturer as well. You know, low fat content, just you know, high quality Frankfurt. So it was, your mother wasn't steering you wrong or allowing you to eat a bad product.
It was absolutely specific, the formula. It really was only made the way Nathan wanted it. And I didn't want to say it wasn't Hebrew National because I want to bust your bubble.
Yeah. All right. Very good.
I want to mention, other than Frankfurters, I want to talk about 1957 or so.
Yeah.
About 1 or 2 in the morning, I was living in Queens, and I would be studying for my exams, and friends who were going to different colleges, we would gather about 1 o'clock in Queens. We were living in Cambria Heights at the time. We would go to Brooklyn, and that was my first taste of eating raw clams and frog's legs.
Right.
And we used to watch the guy. He was a big, burly African-American guy. This would be 1957.
Right.
And we'd stand there and just watch him shuck the clams.
Yeah.
And that was a show in itself.
Right.
But again, the introduction to eating raw clams started there for me.
Right. The seafood was also high. I mean, the food was really fresh because they went to the marketplace in the morning. They knew the quantities of food they needed. They actually had charts that would tell them approximately what they would sell on a given day, and depending on the season, summer, winter, fall, and the weather as well. If it was a rainy day, they knew how much product they needed. If it was a sunny day, they knew how much product they needed. It was a very efficient operation, much more sophisticated. And I go into that in the book because people would just think it's just a hot dog stand. No. They weighed the sandwiches, the meat. They knew how much they were serving on a given sandwich. I mean, everything was inventoried in the morning, at the end of the day. They kept track of things. I mean, there was a lot of money going through that place too, so they tried to prevent theft, and that's a whole other subject, which is a very hard thing to do in a cash business. There are a lot of tricks for stealing, not just money, but The product, yeah, sneaking it out in garbage cans and things like that. And there's some funny stories about my grandfather when he knew someone was stealing too. There's one story where he was tipped off by customers often that this guy was putting coins in his shoe. So he got a bunch, I don't know, I can't remember whether it was a cup or a bowl of hot water, and he acted like he tripped and he spilled it on the guy's shoe. And then he insisted that he come to his office to change his socks and his shoe. And of course the money poured out of the shoe, and then they went to the guy's locker and he had a milk can filled with coins that he'd been collecting for who knows how long, and of course he was fired. But and then there were stories about many workers that were quite good at their jobs who they kind of knew were stealing, but they overlooked because they were just too good as workers. There was something my dad told me about as well. So, yes.
I just wanted to say, talking about the quality of the hot dogs,
Yeah.
to this day, the only hot dogs my family will let me buy for either grilling or boiling are Nathan's, which is funny because my father was a manager for Needix, which was a competitor. And we've gone through Needix and we've gone through International, and Nathan's always wins. It's the only hot dog in my house.
That's great. Well, if you don't, Needix is really interesting place. First of all, it was on like 3 corners of Stillwell Avenue at the same time as Nathan's was a very small place. So I always wondered, why did my grandfather succeed while Needix didn't? But I never had a Needix hot dog, so I don't know if you
No
ever
comparison.
did. No? Okay. Well,
Much thinner.
okay, yeah, that's the other thing. The skin came from Switzerland, and they tested it all the time. My grandfather was like a little,
And
I
it
think it
was
was a
like
little
a white
bit,
bread roll.
what?
It was like a white bread roll. It wasn't the bun.
The bun, right. But, he cared about everything. Well, my uncle sold the business 25 years ago, actually in 1987. So different people exchanged hands a few times. It even went bankrupt in the early 90s. And then, it became a private company, then became a public company again in 93. And it's taken a lot of years, but they've made it into something very successful. But it's not family run. I will say the family does own the building and the land, and that's the only relationship we have to Nathan's at all. It's just the Coney Island real estate.
In
Yes.
the film,
Yes.
it
I should
shows-
say, maybe just, sorry to interrupt, but I said before, but yeah, there was a film called Famous Nathan before the book, so she's referencing
My
the
uncle
film.
owned a cigar store diagonal to Nathan's, by the way.
Okay.
Gold,
You mean
Goldstein?
by the subway?
Yeah,
That was
Okay.
Goldstein.
Sam Haber and then my uncle Stan.
Okay.
I have to just ask this.
Yes.
Growing up, going to Steeplechase and Nathan's and looking at the film, it was all white.
That's right.
It was all white.
What, the customers?
The customers were basically 99% white. And then, do you think, like, when Ebbets Field changed and it went down, what happened?
The subways changed it.
What do you think was the most influential thing that happened there that created a different type of population coming down?
Well, there was Robert Moses, I don't know, he was the art commissioner who didn't like Coney and felt it was too seedy and wanted to create parks and things like that, so he expanded the beach and cut off a part of the Coney Island amusement area. There was a low-income housing projects that were brought in to Coney Island as well. But I don't think. If you look in the crowds in those films, it's mixed. I'm not saying it's. I wasn't there in those days. But I'm saying when I look in the films in the crowds, it's scattered black people in the and also in terms of the workers. My grandfather was supposedly the first person. I don't know if this is true to integrate the counter. Which was around 49 or 50, right, to have black workers. So, but I know there was a lot of segregation down here, absolutely. That I know, and I know the beaches were segregated, and I know the bathhouses were very segregated, but there were black populations down there. I've seen pictures even in the late 1800s of black people, but obviously a very small amount. But But yeah, things changed in the 60s. Obviously, I mean, there was a big change because not only did people move out to the suburbs, that was a big change. Like my parents, took us to the suburbs because they wanted a house with a backyard. So that was a change, and then there was an influx of new populations. And but you were going to add something.
When I was a kid, we were there all the time because my parents worked in business.
Right.
And they used to bring busloads of people from Philadelphia, from out of New York that were not white. But in the early 60s, like 66, we had race riots. And that was when the civil rights movement started. And since then, it's been all integrated.
Yeah, well, Steeplechase closed down partly because the woman was prejudiced and didn't want black customers. I mean, so there was that aspect of Coney Island at the time. I mean, that's what I was told.
Yeah, well,
That was one of the reasons.
I grew up on Coney Island,
Yes.
and in the 50s, 40s, 50s, part of 60, and I went to the junior high school there in school, and we had Afro-American students, no Spanish people, but we had Afro-American, my teachers. We were just talking about my home ec teacher and my gym teacher. They were Afro-American, and then they were students. They weren't in the minority of students, mostly white, Italian, and Jewish.
Right. But I don't know, did we answer your question? Sorry.
I lived there, and I still live down there. And the thing that changed there was when the subway came from the D train, started to come all the way up from the Bronx. That's when the segregation changed enormously.
Do you know what year that was?
It had to be in the 60s.
The 60s, right.
And, then the projects came after that. But I'm still in the area there. I can't say I'm a Coney Island person anymore, but I'm not far.
Right.
And it's changing again.
Right.
But the hot dogs are not the same.
I wouldn't say they're not the same either. I mean, I don't think many things are the same, and it's hard to keep that quality.
She may mean the price.
The price, of course.
I think she's talking about both, right? But okay, yes.
When your uncle or father made the decision to sell.
Well, my dad was, just to correct one thing, my dad left the business. That's another part of my obsession maybe with Nathan's and my family history is when I was about 7, my dad left the business. He had conflicts with his brother about how to run the business and about their roles in the business, and he wasn't too happy there, and so he went into his own business, a restaurant business very similar, called Snack Time in New York City.
Which was very successful.
Which was very successful for many years and had high quality, was run very much, it had the same menu as Nathan's and run very much the same. It was right near Madison Square Garden, because I used to go to the Knick games and eat there before or after, and hang out, of course, there. But so it was, my uncle took over when he sold, yes.
Did he talk to the grandchildren about their legacy? I mean, I'm familiar with lots of family businesses have best friends, and they struggle, and they're not consultants that help family businesses. I was curious about the period of time when this all changed. Was there faction?
Yeah, it is discussed in the book. It's complicated. Families in business are not easy. I mean, I'm sure that there are a lot of family members that had gripes about my grandfather for one reason or another. You see some of that in the movie, and my uncle had 3 sons. One of them who became a psychologist who worked in the business but didn't want to take it over. He had a middle son who was in the business but probably wasn't right for taking it over. I'd like to be honest, he did experience a religious conversion and became a born-again Christian. So that would have created a problem in terms of the family, and then the younger son who was too young, probably at the time in '87, he was only in his early 20s at that point. No, I'm sorry, he would have been a little older, but I don't think he was ready to take it over, wanted to take it over. And my uncle didn't come to my dad and said, "You want to take it over now?" or come to me. Not that I wasn't a restaurateur, so I would know nothing about the business. Or I don't know, I mean, keeping it in the family was something my grandfather really wanted, something he really cared about, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way, Maybe the best decision was to sell it at that time, it succeeded in ways that it never did in those middle years. There were lots of problems with the franchising and expansion. So, I don't know, do you have an opinion? Okay.
Rather than
I should
read the
probably
book.
keep it to myself.
We'll talk later. We'll talk later.
Wait, you're right on, but there are a lot of things. Let them read the book.
Yeah. Read the book. There's a lot more details, obviously.
I
Yes.
have a question. When they first opened the stand, the original stand,
Yes.
did they buy the hot dogs from the distributor? I, for some reason, thought that I once read or something, they were making their own sausages or something. So they
Well, this gets to the whole idea of legends and myths and public relations. Most of the things you heard about Nathan's are not true. I hate to tell you. Like the whole Jimmy Durante and Eddie Cantor, telling my grandfather to sell it for a nickel, and then sometimes you'll read that he lent them the money, the $300. None of that's true. He did know Jimmy Durante because he did work down there, but
He worked at Feldman.
yeah, he worked at Feldman's where my grandfather worked. That was the other famous place down in Coney Island. But my grandfather, he, in his interview, goes into great depth about how he decided to go into business on his own, and actually he had a partner initially. So, and he sold it for a dime. When he first started the stand, he sold it for a dime and he wasn't making enough. So he thought to himself, I should sell it for a nickel because I'm working at Max's Busy Bee in Manhattan and we're selling it for a nickel there. And he was worried that they might close him down, the big boys, politicians, because he was stepping on other people's toes by undercutting people. So it had nothing to do with Eddie Cantor or Jimmy Durante. What else? Well, the secret spice, I have to say, we could go into that for a long time, but I love my grandmother more than anything, but it's not, like, you'll read that it came from my great-great-grandmother's, like, it was her recipe, like in Poland with sausages, and then it filtered down through my grandmother into the stand. It didn't happen that way. My grandfather started the stand before he knew my grandmother. He tried different hot dog purveyors. He settled on high grade. I'm not saying that my grandmother wasn't involved in the tasting of it and saying what she liked, because my grandmother was a great cook. But, it was clearly like my grandfather, my grandmother, and high grade who also had the expertise in making the hot dog. The hot dog was never made there. It wasn't made there.
So is high grade the same people that make your all pork franks?
Well, I don't know what high grade as the place that sold hot dogs to Nathan's closed, I think sometime in the 60s.
So was their formula for the Nathan's Frank different than other things?
Well, that's a really good question. It depends on who you talk to. Because if you talk to Paul Burley, who worked at high grade, he said it wasn't too much different than what they were selling to this other place on 42nd Street, which I don't know the name of. But it was slightly different. That's what he said. There was slightly more of this spice or that spice. So you could take your pick. Sometimes history is not completely knowable. But I know my grandfather and my grandmother had good taste buds. They loved food. They really cared about food tremendously. And, they were making sure that it tasted the way they wanted to taste. They were from Poland. They probably, and both my grandmother and grandfather, they probably had certain taste buds based on what they sampled there and what their parents did cook for them. So maybe that's where you get the great-great-grandmother idea, that they learned through generations of eating what spices they like. But it depends on who you talk to. There's different versions of the truth on that. I came to my own, but
the bottom line is the success and acceptance of the product by the general population.
Sure.
It wouldn't be where it is today.
Of course.
How it got there without it being a very good product.
Absolutely. It tasted good, it was high quality, and the people knew how to cook it. They had this great griddle. I don't know if you noticed this great gas griddle. So they could control like a foot of the griddle at a time. And, again, those guys worked there, Sammy Fiorillo, he was there, you see pictures, for 40 years, and he's always in that corner there. They were experts at what they did, all of them. They were passionate. They created this core group of workers that was probably, I really think, never matched in any other restaurant in history in some ways. The speed and the skill set of those people working there. That's what I've been told by High Brown. So.
I'd like to know if anybody here has stopped at the Nathan's by the driving range across from the Elks.
Yep.
Did you come on County Road 39 and see
I came
the
27.
Nathan's truck?
Oh, someone told me about the truck. I didn't see it or notice it.
It's across from the Elks.
Yeah. There is, I know, I have seen those trucks around. There are trucks that sell around.
When was the last time you were at Nathan's in Coney Island? And what do you think of it today?
I was there last week. Well, because, for this book, I have to go down there and take pictures all the time, and, I've done interviews and things like that. Well, it's not the same business. I mean, I have opinions. The food, I don't think it tastes the same. I don't think the potatoes have anywhere near the taste, the quality of the taste that, and even, like, I brought managers there, and they say that it's too oily. In other words, if you cook it too long, right, the oil seeps in, and it's greasy, and it's oily, and the taste isn't there, and, listen, it's a different kind of business. It's a licensing business in a way. I mean, Nathan's is still there. It looks a little bit the same, and people still love it. So I'm not going to tell them not to love it or eat it, but it's not the same. What do you think?
I went to Nathan's from the time I was 4 till the time I was 24.
Yes.
Some of the time I went.
Right.
And then I left the state and everything, and a few years ago, on my 50th birthday, I wanted to go to Nathan's. My husband said, any way you want to go. I said, I want to go to Nathan's. My memories were there.
Right.
So I took 3 couples and made myself a surprise. I surprised them. When I picked them up in a limousine, and I said, dress bowling chic. But I didn't know Nathan's was still there before I made these plans. So I called up Nathan's in Coney Island.
Right.
And I got a manager on the phone. I said, are you still in business? He said, yes. I said, do you take reservations? And the phone went dead. He said, what are you talking about? I want to make a surprise party. I'm inviting 3 couples and we want to have dinner there. He said, what's your name and when are you coming? He said, I told him the night I wanted to come at 8 o'clock. And he says, I have to be there that night. I'm a manager. Ask for me. I'm Benny or Jerry. And I picked them up and I told them bowling chic. She wore slacks. Another girl wore a gown with sneakers. And we went there.
Right.
And I was shocked. First of all, we were in a limo in the park. We were the only people, And we get there, and I go, and there's all homeless people with shopping carts, with their family, with their clothing and everything. And I went and I looked for the manager. He said, oh, yes, I remember. When he gets up and he goes to the outside table, he tells all the homeless people, leave now. And he puts a napkin on his arm. He says, I'll take your order. And it was a fun party.
That's sweet. Did you think it tasted the same?
It tasted, not the French fries, though. Not the French fries. The hot dogs were pretty good. And the seafood.
Yeah.
But that was, when I asked if you take reservations, and there was...
Well, there used to be a little dining room in the back. I don't know if you ever ate in that. But it's gone. Well, the dining room's gone. How are we doing on time?
Well, we'll take a couple more questions and then we'll end here.
Yes.
So I have a great story. I have a lot to grow up walking distance to Nathan's. But I guess it was about 9 years ago, we were doing a memorial in my husband's honor and a scholarship at New York High School in Brooklyn. And so after that, we said, well, let's go.
You stand up. They're having a hard time hearing.
So after the memorial at the high school, with friends and family and all, and they said, well, where are we going to go eat? Now, down in Coney Island, they have a great Italian restaurant, the Carolinas. And so, Gargiulo. So simultaneously, about 10 people in our group said, Nathan's, what would Charlie like? You know, that was my husband named Charlie. What would Charlie do? Where would Charlie go? And everybody, about 10 of them said, Nathan's, and that's where we wound up to celebrate his birthday.
That's so nice. Nice. one more. I think he had.
There's two people, how about two more?
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Did your grandfather ever have a chance to like enjoy the fruits of his labor? Because it seems like he worked all the time, but did he like, you know, take time off? Did he travel back to Europe?
He did actually go to Israel, and he went to Europe on a trip. He didn't travel during many of the years that he was working there, but he did, starting in the 30s, go down to Florida during the winters. And he used to love, my grandmother and him used to love cards, and they used to love fishing, deep sea fishing. And so he took off time during the winters increasingly as he got older. So he wasn't, but when he was there, he was like, he was a fanatic. But yeah, he did enjoy some of that. Not as much as maybe my grandmother would have liked him to retire earlier, for sure.
Just a funny story about the driving range up the street. I have a son who loves hot dogs, and he bought this hot dog maker, which is a roller, a bunch of rollers. You put on a hot dog, cooks it that way. And if you go to Costco, Nathan's is one of the hot dogs that they sell. So we bought Nathan's hot dogs, and we boiled it, and we grilled it, and he used the roller for the hot dogs, and we were trying to compare, the taste. And about 3 weeks ago, we went up to the Nathan's driving range, and they grill it, and, they have their coleslaw, whatever. And he said, "Dad, this is the best. What they do here, I can't do at home." So it's kind of an ambience. I guess it's, a lot of subtle factors all put together, because he said the same hot dog maybe, but somehow that one tasted the best.
Right, well, if you go to a franchise in those small places, I mean, they don't know how to cook them. I mean, that's just the way it is. Anyway.
Okay.
Do you want to say something? Or?
I'm just going to say thank you.
Thank you.